Okay, good morning, everyone. And first of all, welcome back. And I hope you all had a good summer and a relaxing time. So it's good to take a little break and to get back into things. So we are starting up again, and we are starting a new chapter. We're up to chapter 6, right? And chapter 6 is a very interesting chapter. It's a very important chapter. It's something that we've talked about beforehand, and sort of not in a setting of talking about this only, but let's get cracking. Okay, so chapters like this, chapter 6 is talking about primarily when and how are you allowed to shift blame that is you're being blamed for onto someone else. Because let's just talk about this for a second, right? If you think about it for a minute, all right, let's just dive right into it, and we'll deal with that. Page 184, 184, and day 60, 184, day 60. So the question's like this, right? You are one of 2 salespeople in a store. Both you and your coworkers use the cash register to ring up sales. After a customer leaves, you hear the other salesperson tell the stock boy, "Uh-oh, I thought those shirts were on sale." At the end of the day, your boss finds a shortage and blames you for it. May you tell him that it was your coworker who made the mistake, right? So there's a lot of different points that are going on here. These all have to be discussed, right? Number one, right? And the most obvious question, which is straight in our face, right? Can we shift the blame, right? And we're not shifting the blame. I wasn't wrong, right? Number 2, right? You heard something that your coworker said. So you have knowledge, right? About the fact, besides that, it wasn't you, right? But you have knowledge about the other person. And number 3, you're being blamed for it. Right, so it's very important, and the reason why I'm doing this is the first one in a couple of cases that we're going to have, and I don't know how many we're going to get to today, right? But when we're dealing regarding shifting blame or saying it wasn't me or whatever it is in the different cases that we have, right? It is important to have all the facts and all the details regarding what the exact case is. In these scenarios, the exact case is going to make a tremendous difference regarding what the outcome is. So before we go to the halakha, the answer, right, I want to know, what are your thoughts, right? What do you guys think in this scenario, right? Should he say something, he or she say something? If he or she could say something, right, what should she say? What should he or she say, right? There's a lot of different variables over here, and I want to hear what you guys think.
This is Jim. Good morning.
Good morning.
I think I've not looked at the answer, although I'm tempted to first. I think we have a right to protect our reputation. I don't think we are expected to just take blame for something that's clearly not ours. That being said, as you said, it's how you say it. I would tell my boss, exactly what happened. I heard so-and-so saying this, okay? That you're not blaming them because he could have said it and not actually, who knows?
Right. So that's exactly the point. I want to hear what other people have to say, but I'm just going to respond back to you. Taking the blame 100% is an idea of protecting yourself, and that's all part of the equation. That's why we're asking this question. But the other thing is, by you saying what the other person, you heard the other person say, or by saying the other person, is that Lashon Hara. Don't forget, Lashon Hara is even, sorry, Emily, we're on page 184, day 60. Lashon Hara, right, is even if the thing is true, right?
I understand.
Qualification. So the question is, right, are you allowed to repeat that over? Right? Are you allowed to repeat that over?
I mean, the only other thing you have to say is you can say, I didn't do it, but then that's very weak. As far when I say weak, you're not protecting yourself.
Exactly. And I think, right, I hear that. That's part of the equation. Okay, let's hear what other people,
Yeah.
and then we'll.
Okay.
I hear what you say. Let's hear what other people have to say, and we'll circle back. Okay. Okay. Anybody else? No one else has anything to say. Emily?
I don't think you should tell him. You can just say it wasn't me. You know.
But
You don't have to tell.
I'm gonna play devil. I'm gonna put you guys pin you guys against each other. But Jim said that's very weak. You know, he might not believe you.
You could just say I'm. I don't know. I'm not looking at the answer, but you can just say, maybe it was somebody else who was dealing with the cash register. Why don't you ask the other employees?
Right. Okay.
That's what I would say. I wouldn't be like, oh, well, he said, because that's not your job to tell on him. I think you can just say, like, I didn't do it. Please find out if it was another employee.
Okay.
That's what I would say. I don't know.
Okay. Craig, Sherry, Kyla, you guys have anything to say?
Yeah, I agree. I think you just speak for just yourself, and then get the facts to find out more information.
So you agree with Emily?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Sherry?
No, I'm not sure.
That's probably the best answer.
I would think you have an obligation to yourself to be able to defend yourself. I guess you can start off with just saying it wasn't me, but if more was needed down the road, I would think you could say, I don't know who it is, or without naming a person, say I had heard it could be somebody else, investigate a little more.
Okay, very good. Okay, so this halakha is actually very complicated, right? And we're going to get to the answer in a minute, right? But the reason why this, as I said, this chapter is primarily, if you look at the introduction, they call it wisdom of understanding, right? The sermon of understanding. You could read the little paragraph in front. This is a very tricky, where you're trying to protect yourself, but at the same time, right? You have to remember that by protecting yourself, you're not necessarily could say something negative about someone else, right? Where's the line, right? Where are you allowed to protect yourself, right? But at the same time, right? Not saying something negative about someone else that could hurt them, either emotionally, financially, or just whatever, even if not, right? But you're saying something negative about someone else, right? But at the same time, you have the right to protect yourself. Right? So this is something very tricky, and there's various different scenarios that this plays out with, right? And in every scenario, right, we have to remember that there's a lot of different factors that play into it. So if you remember, I pointed out a couple of things over here. Number one, I pointed out that we're dealing with money, right? We're dealing with you're being blamed. You're dealing with that you heard something, right? And at the same, also if it looks bad on you, right? It could be harmful to you, right? If you are being blamed for something like this, right? And also, this was, at least the way you heard it, right, was that it was an innocent mistake, right? Don't forget, the case is telling us over here specifically where you heard something, right? You didn't see something, you heard the person say something, right? So you have firsthand knowledge, right? But what is that firsthand knowledge that you know also? So let's read the halakha, and we'll expand more. And I want to hear what your comments are after we read the halakha also. And if you're on Facebook, feel free to comment in the comment box. If I'm able to, I will respond to it, during the class also. So the halakha is like this. The answer is complicated. Good, right? Right, Sherry, as you said, I don't know, I'm not sure, right? The halakha is complicated. and the things like this. If the person makes an innocent mistake, and you are therefore not obligated to inform the shopkeeper, right? So there's two things. Number one, right? Let's say the shopkeeper didn't come to blame you, all right? Are you obligated to tell the shopkeeper or not? And so we've had this discussion similarly beforehand, but that's where you spoke to the person. We said you're supposed to speak to the person. You're supposed to, tell the person that they should come forward. And then is it your obligation, not obligation? We spoke about a scenario where leaving the shopkeeper out, that you're not being blamed, right? But you have that firsthand knowledge. Over here, the difference is where you're being blamed. Right. So, but you also know, because you overheard the person, and you could tell the difference in between a person that just says, that doesn't really mean it and someone that means it. And especially in this scenario where the person didn't know you were listening or whatever it is, right? When someone makes an innocent mistake, you are not allowed to name the person just to clear your own name, right? This is the framework that we're going to work with. Right now, there's a lot of different scenarios and a lot of different, as we say in Hebrew, pratim, right? A lot of different categories within this halakha, right? Nuance is a better word, sorry. And a lot of different nuances in this halakha that could shift the halakha in one way or another way. But the bottom preference, the main point is, right? What we're starting off with is that if someone made an innocent mistake, right, just to clear your own name, right? You're not allowed to say something. You're not allowed to say something just to clear your own name, right? So, and I just want to read you the Hebrew of the Chavetz Chaim. Well, then we'll get to the details in a minute, right? Nasa davar shelo kahogen. If something happened that was not proper, Uvar Ruven v'shalosh and Ruven came and asked him, and mi asas davar hazeh, who did this? So here's a little different. He's asking who did this, right? He's not blaming you. Next, afilu who mavin shriven chasta bazeh, and aslo legalos misa asas adavar. Even if he understands from the question, right, that Ruvain is accusing him, asher is prohibited legalos miasas adavar zeh, and it's prohibited to reveal who did this. Afilu muraba atzmo, right? Even if he saw it with his own eyes, rak yoshem, right? Ani lo asisi adavar zeh. He should just say, "I did not do this thing." Right. So right now it sounds like what Emily was saying. Right. I didn't do this. Right. You're not allowed to go ahead and blame someone else. Right. Because again, right. This is you're going to be damaging the other person. Right. You're going to say something negative about the other person. You're deflecting, right, to protect yourself, but you're also going to be hurting. So it's a weak answer. Okay. So let the boss prove it. You say, listen, you got to prove it. Right. I didn't do it. Right. You have video footage, whatever. Right. I didn't do it. Right. I didn't do it. Who did it? I didn't do it. That's it. Right. So he might look at you a little. He might. So just to protect to make yourself feel better. Right. That your name is cleared 100%, and you just have a better conscience, or you could go to sleep better, or your ego or your self-esteem or whatever it is, right, is now doing a little better because you got him to know that it was someone else. That's not enough to allow you to put the blame on someone else, right? So that is number one, right? That is where we're starting off with. Let's continue. Any comments on that or questions? Okay, so let's continue and let's take.
So,
Go ahead.
if there were only two of you, then saying I didn't do it implies that you're saying the other person did.
Okay, we're gonna get to that. Very good. All right, we're gonna get to that. Okay.
Okay.
Very good. Very good point. Jim,
Before
what do
we
you want to say?
Reading the whole halakha here, it says that accepting the blame is meritorious unless you will be unjustly penalized.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that. I'm taking it one step at a time. That's what I'm saying. We're gonna get to that. I'm breaking down this halakha into different parts.
Okay, go ahead. I'll hold my comment till later.
And it's important to know the foundation of the halakha. And then I said there's different nuances that switch the halakha in one way or another. The initial point is, right, and this is very important to remember, and has to do with how far it goes that we are not allowed to speak about other people or put blame on other people, that even if it's the other person might think that you did it, right? He has no proof, right? All you're allowed to say is you can't shift it to somewhere else and say, oh, that person, and then that makes you feel better, right? That's what I said. Number one is if it just makes you feel better, right? So we're taking one step at a time. I just want to, this is such an important halakha that we have to take the different steps, right? And recognize where they come from. And therefore we can be able to implement it into our daily lives, right? Easier and better, but also see the how far, that's the point I want to bring out, how far halakha takes us that we have to be concerned, right, about what we say and the words that we say, how it affects someone else, right? The words that we say, how it is portraying the other person or talking negative about other people, we see how far the halakha goes. Even if you're being blamed, right? We're not dealing right now with any financial loss. Didn't put that in the mix, right? Right now, that's step number one, right? Let's continue. We'll get to both of your points in a minute, right? Now, you are, however, right, allowed, right, to say that you did not do it, right? Like we just read in the Chafetz Chaim in the Hebrew. If there are only two possible culprits, right? So now we're getting to Chayale's point, right? If there are only two possible culprits, as in this case, you can make that denial if the other person's actions were in fact improper, right? For instance, if the salesperson had been negligent, right? So you could still make that denial, right? If that person did something wrong, right? So this is where we're getting tricky. By me making a denial, right, it is shifting the blame to the other person because that's the only other possibility. So why can I then say it was the other person, right? Why do I have to say, hey, it wasn't me? It wasn't me. Why can I say it wasn't me? It was, Chaim Yankel, right? It wasn't me. It was Chaim Yankel. Right? What's the difference? So, my friends, this is where our words are so important. Right? The Talmud, in many different places, right, talks about the language that comes out of our mouth. It's so important how we present something. Right? For example, the Talmud tells us that the Torah, which we learn certain halachas out of an extra letter, right? The Torah goes out of its way when speaking about the impure animals, right? The chazir, the pig, and other ones, right? It says, "V'behema she'eno tahora," and the animal that's not pure, right? The commentators ask, why isn't just the Talmud asks, just say behema tameya, right? You save words, right? Why don't you say behema tameya, an impure animal? And the Torah, again, remember, the Torah, we learn there's not an extra letter in the Torah, right? It's not just to make things nice. There's not an extra letter in the Torah. So why does the Torah go ahead and say, behema she'eno tahora? And the Talmud says how careful we have to be with the words that come out of our mouths. How we present something is also part of the halakha. And therefore, when I say it wasn't me, right, it's very different than saying it was the other person, right? Just an example, right? Nuances, right? Some of you, I might have mentioned to you guys in the past, to some of you or not, right? When people ask me, right, the Eitz Chaim parking lot's open on Shabbos or not, right? I answer them is that, the Eitz Chaim's parking lot is not closed on Shabbos. That's how I answer them. And I don't tell them that the Eitz Chaim parking lot is open on Shabbos. Why? It's the same thing. It's not closed. It's the same thing, right? Because the point is that the words that we say make a difference, the way we present them. I do not want to say, right, that the Eitz Chaim parking lot is open. because of what I believe, not judging anybody else, right? Not, not at all, but what I believe, right? Those words are making a roshem, they make an imprint. It's open, it's open, it's open. When I say it's not closed, right? People understand my hesitation, right? People understand that we are trying to be accommodating to everybody within framework of halacha, right? Of course, right? But at the same time, they realize from the way that I worded it, right? There's a sensitivity there, right? And that's the same thing over here, right? Even though, right, it is implied by saying that I did not do it, right? Implies that the other person did it, but there's a difference for me and for the other person, right? But primarily for me, remember, Lashon Hara is also for me. When I say something, when I get accustomed to saying something, it becomes part of who I am. And so for me, by saying I did not do it, instead of saying, Chaim Yankel did it, there's only two of us, so you're gonna get it when I say I didn't do it. That's the difference also regarding in Lashon Hara, right? The laws of speech, the way I present my words, right? So, Chayaleh, right? That you're 100% correct. That when I say I don't do it, right? I didn't do it, sorry, right? And there's only two of us. It is implied that the other person did it, right? But that's still, you're not allowed to go ahead and say the other person did it, right? Because of the way we structure our speech. Before we move on to the next thing, any questions or comments on this? Okay, so the next point is, in general, accepting the blame is considered like a martyr, unless you will be unjustifiably penalized. All right, so I want to read you something from the Chavetz Chaim in Hebrew, and now there's two. Sorry, my face is very in the screen. Right, I know it can be a little scary, like you have my whole face in the screen. There's in halacha, in Jewish halacha, right? There's the letter of the law, and then there's something called the spirit of the law, right? And then there's something called lefnei mishurat hadin. Lefnei mishurat hadin, that means to say in front of, lefnei, in front of, means going above the letter of the law, mishurat hadin, the actual halacha, right? And the Talmud expands on this, that there are certain things that even though in the technical halacha it's okay, and this is a lot in monetary things, this is a lot in other things, something that's people call, it's called the chumrah. People take on a stringency onto their lives, right? There's maybe in technical halacha it's okay to do this, but they want, since there's different disagreements or there's more purity in a certain way of doing something, right? So they want to elevate themselves, right? And therefore they take on something that might be lifnei mishurat hadin, above the actual letter of the law, and that way they elevate themselves, right? We call it a chumrah, we call it a stringency, we call it elevating oneself. There's another terminology called midat chasidut, right? The attribute of righteousness, right? Also a way of phrasing this. So I want to read you the rest of the Chavetz Chaim in Hebrew. I'll translate and then we'll get back to this. And this is something so powerful, again, just to put things in perspective, right? But let's remember, this, what we're talking about right now, is lifnei mishurat hadin. This is not the letter of the law, right? But it's lifnei mishurat hadin. Okay, so let's continue reading over here. And all this, everything that I just wrote about, right, is all regarding the letter of the law. Right? But it is worthy, right, for a Baal Nefesh, someone who is a owner. Baal means an owner of his soul, means to say someone that is working on elevating his soul and making his soul, his neshama, the bigger person in his body, not the physical, but the spirituality. That he should act upon going above the letter of the law. Right? He should not act in a way that in a place where the other person can become embarrassed, right? Or the other person could get hurt, or whatever it is. one should try to go above the letter of the law, right? And now listen to this, Sanhedrin. And even more we find in Tractate Sanhedrin, in the Talmud and Tractate Sanhedrin. Kama Tanem, there's a stories of many different rabbis of the Mishnah, right? We're talking about great Torah sages. See, Tilu al Atzmo, right? Ashama Kadesh Lisvada Mihu Achote. They took the blame of a transgression or an action that did not seem whatever, that other people should not be blamed for that transgression. Right? And so too we find in the book called the Sefer Chasidim, the book of righteousness, right? And this is his words. Imhu b'chaburas b'nei Adam. If he's in a group of people, right? V'nasa davar echad shelo lahogen, and something not right happened. Lo noda mi'achota, we don't know who the person that did it. Tzarech shiyoma, he has to say ani hu shechatisi. Again, he has to say it in the category of midas chasidus, right? In the category of going above the letter of the law, not in dry halacha. Right, just to put that in there, right? I'm the one that transgressed, even though he didn't do the transgression, right? And that's what they're speaking about over here. Now we're going to get to this in a minute. I have to expand on this, okay? So I'm just going to expand on it in a minute, right? And then I'll take questions, right? This is what we're saying over here. There's this idea, right? Of let's say now in this case, right? Store owner comes and say, either you be quiet, you don't say I didn't do it, it's automatically known, right? If it's just the two of you, or you say, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm the one that did it, I'll whatever, right? There's an idea of going above the letter of the law. Now, in this scenario, right, there could be a difference, and that's what Jim was pointing out beforehand. You're not obligated to suffer any financial loss or compensation or come to your current future or compromise your current future, job prospect, or even allowed to name the culprit to prevent any loss of any part, right? So we're not dealing with when there'll be a financial loss for you, right? We're not dealing with right when there'll be a record on your. There'll be a mark on your record, and you won't be able to get any jobs because it circulates. Right? We're not dealing with such big things, right? We're dealing with either something that is whatever. It's not going to get around. Just you're in a group, and I'll just throw out an example that sounds a little babyish, but let's say you're in a group of people, right? And someone lets out gas, right? Oh, everybody's, oh, who did it? And the person's going to be really embarrassed, and everybody's going to start like, you did it. Oh, no. And it's going to come out, and the person's already turning red. Go ahead and say, you know what? I did it. So it's something that's not proper, something that's not nice, right? But you're saving someone else, right? We have to be concerned about other people. Right? We have to be concerned about other people taking that blame, or not even something a little more. You by mistake, someone by mistake, knock something or whatever it is. Right? We'll see other examples. And we're not dealing with financial loss, and a lot of times it's not financial. Sure, this that, right? It's a couple. It's $2, right? Even if let's say it's $2, you know what? I'll just pay the $2. It's not going to go on my record. It said, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I didn't realize it was sale. Here's $2 and move on, right? It's not going to go on your record. It's not going to make any difference. Take it out of your tzedakah if you want, right? But you are protecting someone else, and you are not going ahead and saying something negative about someone else, right? Now, these are all, again, as I said, these are very delicate situations. Every situation is different. That's why it gave these different things. Over here, we're talking about in a store setting. And over here, we're talking about when you heard the other person say something, right? You heard that it was a mistake, right? It wasn't intentional, right? It's only the two of you, right? So by you saying, let's say it's a whole group of people. So then, of course, it's different. You say, it wasn't me. It wasn't me, right? Go around to other people, right? It wasn't me. So then you're not automatically blaming the other person. And there's a difference between, again, and one has to be careful. Don't jump to go against the letter, go on above the letter of the law. It's a concept to be aware of, right? If you're going to resent it, and then also, right? It's important to realize, right? Above, we're talking about Tanaim, great Torah sages, but it's something to put into perspective, right, of where we're supposed to aim to. Don't jump to it if you're not ready for it, but it's at least something to put things into perspective of how we're supposed to see things, right? And this is one scenario, and we're gonna talk about some more, right, in the coming days, right, coming weeks, but coming days in the book, right, about different scenarios of how this plays out in different ways. But the introduction is, number one, right, you're not allowed to go ahead and blame someone else just for just to make yourself feel better, or just for you to not, not to be screamed at by the boss, right, or whatever it is, right? If there's not going to be any financial hurt or emotional hurt, or other, job opportunities or things like that, you're financially okay. You're this. It's not going to make a big difference, right? It's whatever it is, right? So you're not going to go just to make yourself. It wasn't me. It was the other person, right? Which is a natural reaction. It is a natural reaction, and we're not saying it's wrong to have that as a natural reaction, because that's who we are. But at the same time, we have to realize that in halakha, you're not allowed to do that. Now we have the other scenarios. What happens if there's a financial loss? What is going above the letter of the law? Right? What happens if there's only two people? Right? And those are the different things that we spoke about, right, coming out from this halakha. Any comments or questions? Jim, Emily, Sherry, Craig.
Is it, can I talk now? I don't want to get too far. I don't want to.
No. I'm done talking for the day. Go ahead.
I
know that's never possible.
Number one, that won't happen. You are not finished talking, even for the 5 minutes.
Nice.
No, it's kind of, I understand better now, and I'm glad you went through the explanation, because yes, initially you should just hope it kind of goes away, but in reality, the scenario that was first presented to us, I think it'll end up where the other person is going to have to be named, because your reputation will get, if the guy says, well, it was one of you, or a woman, I'm sorry, whoever the boss is, says, well, one of you, I don't know which one, I guess I'll never find out. To me, that has now sullied a little bit my reputation. And I would feel that it would be okay to protect my reputation. Maybe I'm just a little bit more sensitive about that. I was brought up that having a good name is one of the most important things in Judaism. And so if anything wrongly disparages my good name, I feel the need to protect that.
100%. King Solomon said, Tov, Shem Tov, Hashem and Tov. It's better to have a good name than good oil. Right? Having a good name is the most important thing. Part of sometimes having a good name is also, right, knowing, right, that you are willing to, and it comes out, a lot of times it comes out in the long term, right? It comes out, right? The person looked at the video, whatever, the other person would say, it wasn't really him, it was me. He was just trying to protect me, right? A lot of times the good name comes out in the long term, but you're right. Tov, Shem Tov, Hashem Tov, it's important to have a good name. You have to assess how far is this going to go. Is this in a huge company?
Yeah.
And it was millions of dollars of loss. It was, you lost a customer or whatever it is, right? You have to assess the situation and see how much is this really going to hurt, or is it just your feeling, right, that your name, that the other person now looks at you slightly different, but it doesn't make a difference at some, corner store, in Nowheresville, and it's not going to make any difference on your job prospects. The person doesn't know it. He doesn't even know a computer, right? So you have to know, right? You have to look at everything.
Yeah.
To see, is it just my feelings, right, or is it really going to make a difference in a job prospect or not? But you're right. A good name is 100% a very powerful thing.
Rabbi, can I ask you a question?
Please.
Maybe I had to step out to the restroom for a minute. I don't know if you answered this, but what if the guy says, the other guy says, I didn't do it? Like, what if he denies it?
So then you're if the other person denies it, right? So then anyways, you're going to get into unless you have proof that the other person did it, right? So then you're just going to get into a my word against your word, right? And you're not going to gain anything really by just blaming the other person, right? You could just say, if the other person denies it, so then you could just say, listen, it wasn't me. You have to go ahead and find out who it was, right? Because the other person denied it already also, right? So, it's my word against his word, I guess. And go ahead. Now, again, if we're dealing with where it's a $2 thing, it's a corner store, it's not going to make any difference on your perspective. You're okay, you have a good name already, right? Or you have jobs lined up, you have enough money that you don't need this, right? So again, there is a place over here where Lifnei Mishur is in, you just swallow it. Don't say anything. The other person denied it, don't say anything, just keep quiet, move on, right? Or blow over it, say, here's the $5, I'll pay you back, I'm sorry, right? There is that idea of Lifnei Mishur.
Right.
There is that idea of going above, again, as long as it's not gonna hurt you, right? In a very hard way. What is considered hurt for different people, it's different things. For a college kid, and who's not getting supported by their parents, right, and has to pay for their food and is working in a barista, right, and that's how is able to pay his or her rent, and then to put food on the table, right? So then, yeah, that $5 makes a big difference, right? And therefore has to protect themselves. For someone that's doing okay and just doing a summer job somewhere, and it's not going to really make a difference, and no one knows who he is, and it's not going to really do anything. It's a 16 or whatever it is, right? So then, halachically, again, if it falls in the criteria, halachically, you're allowed to say something if you're financially hurt or whatever it is, right? But there is an idea of Lifnei Mishur Sedin. There's an idea of going above and beyond and trying to be the bigger person over here and not put the other person in trouble, even though, right, you might get into a little trouble. So there's no cookie cutter answer over here. Right? That's what I'm trying to point out. And that's why I went so much into the details over here, because there is no cookie cutter answer. The answer is that, number one, the halacha, right, which is more of a cookie cutter. Is there a financial loss, right? Is it how do you say it, right? And then after we're done with that, right, then you have to see, is this really something worth it to put the other person down? Is this really something worth it? Is this an opportunity for me to elevate myself and to grow from this, right? Maybe become a little more humble through this also, right? By even though I'm not the one to blame, but there's an idea of humbling yourself a little bit, right? Not hurting someone else, right? Not blaming someone else, right? Even though they're wrong, but you're the one that's going ahead and blaming them, and that becomes part of who you are, right? Because even though you're doing the right thing, doesn't mean to say that that's not who you become. Just actually to bring this point out, right? And Jim, you're right. I don't stop talking, right? But just to bring this point out, right? We have in the Torah a very interesting halacha, right? It was in last week's Torah portion, if I remember correctly. This last week's Torah portion or the week beforehand? I have to look it up again, right? But there's a very interesting scenario, and 2 weeks ago actually, right, where there's a whole city that is doing idol worshiping. Right? A whole city, town, small town, whatever it is doing idol worship. So now, according to Torah law, right, this is not our discussion right now, but according to Torah law, right, the rabbis, after proving it, and they have witnesses, and the whole scenario, right, the halakha is, if it ever happened or not, that's another question, right? The Jewish law regarding the death penalty is extremely stringent, right? How to do it, you have to have proof. They check out witnesses. It can't be in the slightest difference between their words. And again, we're talking about an eye count, right? And I don't want to get into that right now. But the point I want to bring out is, according to Torah law, that whole city has a punishment of death. You wipe out the whole city. And after the Torah tells us that halacha, right? The Torah says, and Hashem will put rachamim on them. Hashem will give them rachamim and shalom, give them mercy and peace. Right? And the commentators ask, who is this referring to? Those people are dead, right? The rabbis just did what they're supposed to be doing. So who is this that Hashem is putting mercy and peace upon them? And the commentaries say, and I think the last time I saw this was Ramosha Feinstein, but many say this idea, right, is that the Torah is referring to the rabbis, to the people the rabbis that implemented this judgment, and Hashem will give them mercy and peace. Why? Because even when you're doing the right thing, the Rav Chaim Shmulevitz points this out. He said, fire is still fire, right? You have to work with fire, but it'll burn you, right? Even though this is the right thing, you have to go ahead and do this. This is you have to go ahead and do this. You're doing what God wants you to do, but you're still doing something that's we call it achzarius. It's a mean thing. Over here, it's the right thing, but your body is still going ahead and killing people, even though it's the right thing to do. So says God, since you're doing what I'm telling you to do, but human nature is when we do something, right? Even though it might be the right thing, and it still affects us, I'll give you peace and rachamim. I'll give you a special protection that it won't affect you. That it won't affect you as an individual because you're doing what I asked you to do. That's how far we're talking about rabbis that aren't the judge, right? We're not talking about, me and you, maybe you guys, right? But not talking about me. We're talking about righteous people we can't even comprehend. And that action, even though they're supposed to be doing it, it's according to halacha. That's what they're supposed to be doing. God said, I know human nature. I created human nature. The actions you do affect you. The words that you say affect you. And therefore, I'm going to give you special racham. I'm going to give you special mercy. So this is part of the idea of the name of Shur Sadin. Again, I'm not saying that you have to do it. It's called above the letter of the law. But at least it's put into perspective that when we do something or say something, even though we're allowed to do it, even maybe we have to do it, we have to reflect internally and make sure that it doesn't affect us, right? There's a famous story with one of the great rabbis of pre-war Europe that before in the days where they slapped kids, right? Nowadays we don't slap kids, right? There's other ways that we discipline, right? Taking away their tablets. It's a far cry from what it used to be, right? But okay, I'm not saying slapping kids is the right thing, especially not for our generation, right? Every generation has their thing. As King Solomon says, you have to educate a child according to their ways. Commentaries say also according to that generation. Every generation has a different way of educating kids within the framework of Torah law, right? And nowadays, especially, I'm not if it was ever right or not, I don't want to get into that discussion. I mean, before he would discipline his kid and slap him, he would sit him down and say, Tatala, I love you very much. I'm doing this because, right, you have to be disciplined of what you did something wrong. And I want you to know that I'm doing this for this purpose, right? And he would go ahead and discipline him. Afterwards, right, he himself took upon himself, right, to learn something extra about being nice to other people, right? He took upon himself, right, the idea of making sure how to give over things properly. And he said, because even though I have to do this, but at the same time, every action that we do affects us, right? Doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't do it, but we have to be aware of it. And so even though, let's say you're in a scenario where you have to do it, your name is going to be schmutz, right? You're going to have a tremendous financial loss. It's a $20,000 thing, right? Whatever it is, $10,000, a college kid, $10, $15, whatever it is, within your framework. And you have to go ahead and you have to protect yourself, and you have the right to, according to halacha. But at least be aware that what you're doing might affect you. And you shouldn't just take it, oh, that's what I got to do. Okay, fine, let's move on. You have to be aware of it. You got to go ahead and go ahead and relearn the halachas of Lashon Hara. Go ahead and read this paragraph and say there is an idea of a famous church. And we have to realize that the actions affect us. We have to realize that I'm doing it because halachically I'm allowed to do it and I'm protecting myself and I'm allowed to do that. But I have to remind myself that it does affect us, right? So even though halachically I'm allowed to do it, even let's say Lifnei Mishur Sedin, you're supposed to do this because it's a big loss. And this is not Lifnei Mishur Sedin going above the letter of law does not say that you have to take such a big loss. Doesn't. There are times, does not. Doesn't say that you have to, your name should be trampled around. The Ber Maram Chaim, a commentary on the Chavetz Chaim, who he himself wrote also, which expands more, says, let's say it's something that is an immoral thing, something that is an action that will make a chil Hashem, desecrate God's name. So then you're not allowed to. That's not Lifnei Mishur Sedin. What you're doing is, if it comes out that a Jew or a good person or you or whatever it is did something, right? Oh, really? Jews did such a thing? a rabbi did such a thing, a respectable person in the community did such a thing. It'll be more than just protecting that person. It's going to create Chil Hashem, desecrate God's name. So then you have to go ahead and make such things right. There are cases where there's no halacha l'fnei Mishur Sadin either. Again, it depends what the outcome is. But at the same time, we have to remember that there is a concept of Mishur Sadin. There is a concept that this does affect us. Any other questions or comments? Anybody? Go ahead, Emily.
No, I was going to say in a weird way, it's like if you think of other Jews as your brothers and sisters, I think that kind of like, I mean, I agree with what you just said about what, I can't say it in Hebrew, what you said, Mishuras
Lifnei
Adin. Lifnei.
Mishurat Adin.
That's it, yes. But I think also if you think of like other Jews as your brothers and sisters, it kind of like would you, if that was your sibling in that scenario, like how would you treat them? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like in the scenario in the book, like if that was your brother or your sister that you saw that you overheard them saying that, you wouldn't be like, oh, they did it, you know, like you would treat them differently. And so I think like if we think about other Jews as our brothers and sisters, which they are, but we just don't think about them that way often, I think that helps us take the higher road.
100%, and that's the bottom line that you're 100% correct. We've said this many times, and thank you for bringing this back to our class today. The bottom line is, right, we have to remember that we always have to remember that we are brothers and sisters, right? And that makes a big difference in how we present something, how we look at something, right? But even strangers, right? Even people that are not Jewish, this falls under, right? There's different categories, as we mentioned before, but you know, even there, right? You know, sometimes it's better to sometimes take the high road if it doesn't cost so much. But you're right. Looking at our fellow Jews as brothers and sisters, and not just someone that lives on the other side of town, or someone that happens to come to shore, someone that lives in, you know, Canada or Israel or America or whatever it is, or just traveling through, right? Of course, it makes a very big difference of how we present something. You know, we've talked about this in the past. That's the idea of not taking interests, right? Why is there halakha of not taking? This halakha of not taking interest has caused the Jewish people a tremendous headache throughout history. It is one of those halakhas that the non-Jews, the church has used to tell the different kings that look, the Jews think that they're better than us because you're allowed to take interest from a non-Jew, but you're not allowed to take interest from a Jew. Right? What's the reason behind it? Right? If halachically it's okay to take interest, so then why can you take it from a Jew? If halachically it's wrong, it's the wrong thing, so then why can you take it from a non-Jew? And this is something that's been a headache for the Jewish people for a long time. Says Rabbi Schwab, right, and others, but says Rabbi Schwab, right, that of course interest is a legal halachic thing, right? It's business, right? You're allowed to rent your house, right? According to Torah law, you're allowed to rent your car, so why can I rent my money? Right? Why not? It says Rabbi Schwab because when the Torah talks about interest, it only used the word achicha, your brother. It doesn't use the word bnei Yisrael or others. It says achicha, your brother, right? And what's the idea? The Torah is trying to tell us that there's certain things that, you know, your brother or sister needs a house, you'll rent it to them. You might give them a discount on rent, but you rent it to them, right? That's what you do, right? They want to buy a car or long-term, I'll rent it to you for a little. You have to pay for the gas, you have to this, you have to that, whatever, we'll work something out, right? But if they need money, right? You're not going to say, well, I'll only give you a loan if you pay me interest. That's not what you do from your siblings, right? Your parents or your children, right? That's not what you do. That's not accepted, right? So Torah is trying to teach us with this halacha is that it's not, we're not saying, oh, them, we could do something that's bad. We could charge them interest. No, that's the normal thing to charge interest. But we have to realize that the Jewish people, we are brothers and sisters, right? And you don't charge your brothers and sisters interest. So that's the same idea that, like you're saying. Yes, if we refocus, a lot of things are going to change out of how we look at our brothers and sisters. But this halacha is, yes, it is primarily for the Jewish people, right? When you deal with other Jewish people, but it's also if you're not dealing with Jewish people, right? Even if you're not dealing with Jewish people, right? The Lefnei Mishur Shadin part changes, right? Going above the letter of the law changes a little bit. How far do you have to go above the letter of the law for a non-Jewish person? changes, right? Then it would be for a Jewish person. But at the same time, a lot of times, if it really doesn't affect you, you could create a tremendous Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying God's name, right? And that's part of the calculation. That's a different form of Lifnei Mishur, sanctifying God's name, not throwing someone under the bus, even a coworker, whatever it is, you could, change things up. Again, that is a whole new avenue to go down, right? And new, I think, to go down, but you're right. Definitely, if we refocus that we are brothers and sisters, we'll start looking at things very different. Okay, well, thank you everybody for coming.
Thank you.